The year was 2347, and humanity had changed in ways that no one could have predicted 3 centuries ago. They had spread across 12 star systems, built cities on distant moons, and created technology that their ancestors would have called magic. But the most important change was invisible to the galaxy. Humanity had become dangerous. Admiral Price stood on the bridge of the Earth defense vessel Ironclad, watching the stars through the massive viewport. She was 52 years old, with gray eyes that had seen too much and dark hair that was turning silver at the temples. She had commanded the Sol Defense Network for 10 years, and in all that time she had never fired a shot in anger. She hoped that would never change, but she knew better than to believe in hope. The bridge was quiet, filled with the soft hum of computers and the gentle beeping of monitoring systems. 20 officers worked at their stations, each one trained for years to handle any crisis. They were the best humanity had to offer and was proud to serve with them. Lieutenant Daniel Cooper sat at the sensor station, his young face lit by the blue glow of his screens. He was only 26, fresh from the academy, but he had sharp eyes and quick instincts. When his screens suddenly filled with warning lights, he did not panic. He simply spoke in a clear, steady voice. "Admiral, we have contact. Multiple signatures emerging from hyperspace near Jupiter's orbit." Felt her heart rate increase, but her face remained calm. She had trained for this moment for 30 years. "How many ships, Lieutenant?" Daniel's fingers moved across his console and his face grew pale. "Still counting, ma'am. 300 vessels, 500, 1,000. He paused, swallowing hard. "The count is still rising. We're looking at over 3,000 ships." A cold silence fell over the bridge. 3,000 ships. The entire Earth defense fleet numbered less than 300 vessels. Even with their advanced technology, those odds were terrifying. Commander Stephen Blake approached his chair. He was her second in command, a tall man with calm brown eyes and a voice that never wavered. He had served with for 15 years, and she trusted him with her life. "The Imperial fleet," Stephen said quietly. "They've finally come." Nodded. They had conquered 100 worlds across the galaxy. They were known for their cruelty and their efficiency. Species that surrendered were enslaved. Species that resisted were destroyed. There was no middle ground with the Empire. "They're hailing us," Daniel reported. "Standard surrender demand." Stood slowly, straightening her uniform. "Put it through." The mane flickered to life and got her first look at an officer. The alien was humanoid in shape, but that was where the similarities ended. Its skin was covered in scales of deep purple, and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern stared out from its face. When it spoke, its voice was harsh and grating. "Primitive creatures of Earth, I am Grand Admiral of the Imperial Fleet. You will surrender your world and submit to processing. Your population will be sorted. The strong will serve. The weak will be eliminated. Resistance is extinction. You have 1 hour to comply." Felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice calm and cold. "I am Admiral Price of the Earth Defense Network. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, Grand Admiral. You see, you've entered human space without permission." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. "That's not something we allow." Made a sound that might have been laughter. "You threaten us. We have destroyed civilizations older than your species. We have crushed empires that spanned 1,000 worlds. Your primitive vessels are nothing but toys. Your weapons are children's playthings. You cannot fight us. You cannot run from us. You can only submit and hope for mercy." Smiled, and there was nothing warm in that smile. "Then I suppose you won't mind if we demonstrate exactly what these primitive vessels can do." She cut the transmission with a wave of her hand and turned to her crew. Every officer on the bridge was watching her, waiting for orders. She saw fear in some eyes, determination in others, but she saw no panic. These were professionals who had trained their entire lives for this moment. "Activate Protocol Prometheus," said. "All stations, weapons free. It's time to show these conquerors what humanity can do. Across the solar system, humanity's true defenses came online. Hidden stations buried deep within asteroids began to power up weapons that had never been fired. Ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers and mining vessels revealed their true nature. Weapons platforms that had been sleeping in the dark for decades opened their eyes and locked onto targets. 300 years of paranoid preparation were about to pay off. On Luna, Earth's moon, Dr. Mitchell monitored the situation from the control room of the most classified facility in human space. She was 63 years old, with white hair and tired eyes that had spent decades staring at computer screens. She was the lead scientist on Project Thunderbolt, humanity's most secret weapons program. "All platforms are reporting ready," her assistant said. Peter Grant was a young man of 30, brilliant and eager. He had worked with for 5 years, and he still did not fully understand the weapons they had created. "Quantum lock is stable. We can fire on your command." Looked at the screens showing the massive fleet. 3,000 ships, each one carrying thousands of crew members. Millions of living beings who had come to destroy her world. "Transmit authorization to Admiral Price," said quietly. "May God forgive us for what we're about to do." Back on the ironclad received the authorization code. She looked at Stephen, who met her eyes and nodded. There was no hesitation in his gaze, no doubt. They both knew what had to be done. "All ships," said, her voice carrying across the fleet through quantum communication links. "Execute Thunderbolt. Fire at will." The fleet had arranged itself in a standard conquest formation, spreading out in a massive sphere around Earth. It was a formation designed to intimidate, to show overwhelming force, to crush any hope of resistance. Against any other species in the galaxy, it would have worked perfectly. But humans were not like any other species in the galaxy. From hidden positions throughout the solar system, humanity unleashed weapons that should not have existed. Weapons that the galaxy did not know were possible. Weapons that humanity had spent 3 centuries developing in secret, hoping they would never need to use them. Quantum disruption, cannons tore apart the molecular bonds holding ships together. Antimatter lances burned through shields and armor like they were made of paper. Gravity wells appeared out of nowhere, crushing mighty warships into objects the size of coins. In the first 3 seconds, 400 ships ceased to exist. Grand Admiral stared at his tactical display, watching as hundreds of green icons turned red and then vanished entirely. His 4 eyes widened in shock. In all his years of conquest, in all his 100 victories, he had never seen anything like this. "What is happening?" he screamed at his officers. "Report." But his officers had no answers. They had come to crush a primitive species. They had found something else entirely. They had found humanity. And humanity was just getting started. Grand Admiral had conquered 47 worlds in his long career. He had broken the backs of proud empires and brought ancient civilizations to their knees. He had watched species beg for mercy and had granted none. He was the greatest military commander the Empire had ever produced, and he had never known defeat. Until now. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching his tactical display with growing horror. 400 of his ships were gone. Not damaged, not retreating, simply gone. Erased from existence in the span of 3 heartbeats. The weapons that had done this were unlike anything in records. They were impossible. "Report," he screamed at his tactical officer. "What weapons are they using?" The tactical officer, a veteran of 30 campaigns, could not keep the fear from his voice. "Unknown, Grand Admiral. Our sensors cannot identify the energy signatures. Our shields had no effect. The ship simply stopped existing." Gripped the arms of his command chair so hard that his claws left marks in the metal. This was not supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to be easy prey. The Empire's intelligence reports had described them as a young species, barely capable of interstellar travel. Where had these weapons come from? All ships return fire, ordered. Focus all weapons on the nearest human vessels, destroy them. The remaining fleet responded with everything they had. Energy beams lanced out across the void. Missile swarms erupted from launch tubes. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds. The Empire threw its full fury at the human defenders. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Graham watched the incoming fire from the bridge of the destroyer Swift Justice. She was 34 years old, with short hair and eyes the color of steel. She had joined the Navy at 18 and had risen through the ranks on talent and determination. This was her first real battle, and she intended to survive it. Enemy fire incoming, her tactical officer announced. Multiple impacts on forward shields in 3 seconds. Lisa kept her eyes on her displays, counting down silently. The weapon struck her ship's shields in a storm of light and fury. The bridge shook slightly, and warning lights flickered on several consoles. "Damage report," Lisa ordered. "Shield integrity at 97%, her officer replied, surprise evident in his voice. "Their weapons are barely affecting us." Lisa allowed herself a small smile. This was humanity's second secret, the one they had guarded just as carefully as their offensive weapons. While other species had focused on building bigger guns and faster missiles, humans had obsessed over defense. Adaptive shields that learned from every attack and grew stronger. Armor that could repair itself in real time. Point defense systems that could track and destroy thousands of projectiles at once. They had come expecting to fight primitives. They had found a fortress. "Return fire," Lisa ordered. "Target their engine sections. Let's show them what we can do." Across the battlefield, human ships began their counterattack. They moved with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural, each vessel anticipating the movements of its neighbors. This was the result of decades of training, of simulations run millions of times, of crews that had worked together until they could fight as one. Captain Young commanded the battleship Defiance from the center of the human formation. He was a quiet man of 45, with a shaved head and calm eyes that never showed emotion. He had spent 20 years preparing for this day, and now that it had come, he felt only a cold determination. "Focus fire on their command ships," he ordered. "Take out their leadership and the rest will fall apart." The Defiance's main guns charged with a high-pitched whine that every crew member felt in their bones. Then they fired. A lance of pure energy crossed the void in an instant, striking a cruiser at the center of its formation. The cruiser's shields flared bright blue, held for half a second, and then collapsed. The beam punched through the hull like a fist through wet paper. The cruiser exploded, and 200 more crew members died. On the Eternal Dominion, Grand Admiral watched his fleet being torn apart. Ship after ship vanished from his display. His commanders were screaming for orders, but he had no orders to give. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. "Grand Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving transmissions from the fleet. They're asking permission to retreat." Retreat. The word tasted like poison in his mouth. Fleets did not retreat. They conquered or they died. That was the way of the Empire. That was the code he had lived by for his entire career. But as he watched another 50 ships disappear in a wave of impossible fire, he realized that the code no longer mattered. If he did not retreat, there would be no one left to report what had happened here. The Empire would send another fleet and another, and they would all be destroyed because no one had warned them. "All ships," said, forcing the words out through clenched teeth. "Begin tactical withdrawal. Fall back to hyperspace jump points." His officers stared at him in shock. No commander had ever ordered a retreat. It was unthinkable. It was shameful. It was necessary. The fleet began to pull back, but the humans did not let them go easily. Human ships pursued them across the solar system, firing constantly, destroying any vessel that slowed down or turned to fight. It was not a battle anymore. It was a slaughter. Dr. Mitchell watched the engagement from her station on Luna, her face illuminated by the red and green lights of the tactical display. She had spent her entire career developing the weapons that were now tearing the fleet apart. She should have felt proud. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt only a deep sadness. Doctor, Peter Grant stood beside her, his young face troubled. "Are you all right?" Shook her head slowly. "Look at them, Peter. Thousands of ships, millions of beings. They came here to kill us and we're destroying them like insects." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I built these weapons because I had to, because I knew that someday someone would come to destroy us, but I never wanted to use them. I never wanted to kill so many." Peter did not know what to say. He was young, and he had not yet learned that victory always came with a price. On the ironclad, Admiral Price watched the retreat with cold satisfaction. They had won. Against odds that should have been impossible, they had won. But she knew this was only the beginning. "Admiral," Stephen Blake said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from the flagship. They're asking for terms." Raised an eyebrow. "Terms? They came here to exterminate us and now they want terms." "It appears so, ma'am." Considered for a moment. Part of her wanted to destroy the remaining ships, to wipe them out completely as a warning to anyone else who might threaten Earth. But another part of her knew that would be a mistake. Dead enemies could not carry messages. Dead enemies could not warn others. "Tell them they may have 17 ships," said. 17 vessels to carry their survivors home. The rest will be destroyed if they do not surrender immediately. It was a harsh offer, but it was more mercy than they had ever shown their victims. 17 ships out of 3,000, less than 1% of the Grand Fleet that had come to conquer Earth. Grand Admiral received the terms and felt his heart sink. 17 ships. It was an insult. It was a humiliation beyond anything he had ever imagined. But what choice did he have? If he refused, the humans would destroy them all. "Accept their terms," he said, his voice hollow. "Choose the 17 ships with the most survivors. Everyone else, prepare to be collected by the humans or die fighting." The battle ended 11 minutes after it began. Of the 3,000 warships that had entered the Sol system, only 17 survived. They limped away into hyperspace, carrying the broken remains of the greatest fleet the Empire had ever assembled. And across the galaxy, species who had lived in fear of the Empire looked toward a small blue world and wondered what new power had risen among the stars. The wreckage of the fleet drifted through space like a graveyard of ambition. Twisted metal, shattered hulls, and the frozen bodies of warriors who had thought themselves invincible floated in the void around Earth. It was a sight that would haunt the dreams of every species in the galaxy for generations to come. Admiral Price stood before the assembled cameras on the bridge of the ironclad, broadcasting on every frequency that the surviving ships could receive. She had changed into her formal uniform, the deep blue fabric decorated with medals she had earned over 30 years of service. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with a cold fire. "People of the Empire," she began, her voice carrying across light years of space, "your fleet came to our home with threats of extinction. Your Grand Admiral promised to sort our population, to enslave the strong and kill the weak. He called us primitive. He called us insects. He was wrong." She paused, letting the silence stretch out. Behind her, through the viewport, the wreckage of the fleet was visible as a field of debris stretching across the darkness. 11 minutes, continued. That is how long your Grand Fleet lasted against us. 3,000 of your finest warships crewed by your best warriors armed with your most powerful weapons. 11 minutes. Think about that. Remember it. Tell your emperor, tell your people, tell every species you have ever conquered. Stepped closer to the camera, her face filling screens across the galaxy. "Humanity does not kneel. Humanity does not submit, and humanity does not forget. We did not ask for this war. We did not want it. We have no interest in conquest or empire. We want only to live in peace, to explore the stars, to build and create and dream. But make no mistake, anyone who threatens our people, our world, or our way of life will face the same fate as your grand fleet. She straightened, her voice becoming formal and final. This is not a threat. This is a promise. We are humanity, and we will defend ourselves with everything we have. Tell your masters, spread the word across the galaxy, and pray that you never give us reason to come for you. The transmission ended and let out a long breath. The cameras switched off, and suddenly she was just a tired old woman who had killed millions of beings in the span of 11 minutes. Stephen Blake approached her quietly. That was well done, Admiral. The galaxy needed to hear that. Did they? Shook her head. I just threatened every species in the galaxy with annihilation. That's not diplomacy, Stephen. That's the beginning of something terrible. It's also the truth, Stephen replied. And sometimes the truth is the only weapon that matters. Looked out at the debris field. Somewhere in that wreckage were the remains of Grand Admiral, who had chosen to go down with his flagship rather than survive the humiliation of defeat. She wondered if he had understood, in his final moments, just how badly he had miscalculated. On Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. People poured into the streets, celebrating the defeat of the alien invaders. For 3 centuries, humanity had lived with the knowledge that they were not alone in the universe, that there were powers out there that could crush them without effort. Today, that fear had been replaced with something new. Pride, confidence, and perhaps a little bit of arrogance. Dr. Mitchell did not celebrate. She sat alone in her office on Luna, watching the celebrations on her screen with troubled eyes. Peter Grant found her there hours after the battle had ended, still staring at the same images. Doctor, you should rest, Peter said. You've been awake for over 30 hours. Did not look away from the screen. They're celebrating Peter, dancing in the streets, cheering, waving flags. They don't understand what just happened. Peter sat down across from her. We won. We defeated the most feared empire in the galaxy. What's not to understand? We showed the galaxy what we can do. Finally turned to face him, and Peter was shocked by the exhaustion and fear in her eyes. Before today, we were an unknown species on a minor world. Other civilizations ignored us because we weren't worth noticing. Now everyone knows. Now everyone has seen what our weapons can do. She stood and walked to her window, looking out at the blue curve of Earth rising over the lunar horizon. Some species will fear us, she continued. They'll see us as a threat that needs to be eliminated before we grow stronger. Some will want to be our friends, hopping to gain access to our technology. Some will try to steal our secrets to find weaknesses they can exploit. She paused. And some will simply hate us because we've proven that the strong can be beaten, and that challenges everything they believe about the universe. Peter considered her words carefully. So what do? Turned back to face him, and some of the fire returned to her eyes. We keep building. We keep preparing. We make sure that the next fleet that comes for us, whoever sends it, meets the same fate as the. And we hope that our existence is enough to convince others that attacking us isn't worth the cost. That sounds like a cold way to live, Peter said. It's the only way to survive. Sat back down at her desk and began pulling up new research files. Now, let's get back to work. We have a lot to do before the next threat arrives. Across the solar system, the cleanup efforts began. Human ships moved through the debris field, searching for survivors, collecting salvageable technology, and cataloging the dead. It was grim work, but necessary. Every piece of technology they recovered might contain secrets that could make humanity stronger. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Graham commanded the salvage operations in her sector. Her crew worked in silence, the earlier excitement of victory replaced by the somber reality of what they had done. They found bodies floating in the void, their scales frozen, their four eyes staring at nothing. They found escape pods that had been hit by debris, killing everyone inside. They found a few survivors, terrified creatures who expected to be tortured and killed. "Treat them with respect," Lisa ordered her crew. "Medical attention for the wounded, food and water for everyone. They're prisoners, not animals." One of her officers looked surprised. "Ma'am, they came here to exterminate us." Lisa nodded. "They did, and we stopped them, but that doesn't make us like them. We're better than that. We have to be." The prisoners were shocked by their treatment. In the Empire, captured enemies were always tortured for information, then either enslaved or executed. The concept of treating defeated foes with dignity was alien to them. Some wept. Others simply stared, unable to comprehend the strange creatures who had destroyed their fleet and then offered them kindness. Word of this treatment spread quickly through the surviving ships. By the time the 17 permitted vessels reached the edge of the solar system and prepared to jump to hyperspace, their crews had already begun to question everything they had been taught about the universe. Grand Admiral was dead, but his second-in-command, Sub-Admiral, had survived aboard one of the escaping ships. She stood on the bridge of the Crimson Victory, watching as the Sol system faded into the distance. She had served the Empire for 50 years and had never known doubt. Now, doubt was all she had left. "What will you tell the Emperor?" her aide asked. Was silent for a long moment. "The truth, that we found a species unlike any we have encountered before, that they defeated us in 11 minutes, that they could have destroyed us all but chose to show mercy." She paused. "And that if we ever attack them again, they will not be so merciful." The Crimson Victory jumped to hyperspace, carrying the survivors of the greatest defeat in history. Behind them, Earth hung in the darkness like a blue jewel, beautiful and peaceful. And incredibly, unimaginably dangerous. 3 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. News of the defeat spread from world to world, carried by traders and diplomats and refugees. Every species had the same questions. Who were these humans? Where had they come from? And how had they destroyed the most powerful fleet in the galaxy in less time than it took to eat a meal? The Emperor received the 17 surviving ships with cold fury. He listened to Sub-Admiral's report in silence, his 4 eyes fixed on her face as she described the impossible weapons, the unbreakable shields, the coordination that had seemed almost supernatural. When she finished, the throne room was silent. "You failed me," the Emperor said finally. "You failed the Empire, 3,000 ships, and you bring me back 17. Bowed her head. "Yes, Divine One, I have no excuse. The humans were beyond anything we anticipated. Our intelligence was wrong. Our assumptions were wrong. Everything was wrong. And yet you survived." The Emperor's voice dripped with contempt. "You, of all our warriors, chose to flee rather than die with honor." Looked up, meeting the Emperor's eyes. It was a breach of protocol that would normally result in immediate execution, but she no longer cared about protocol. "I survived to bring you this warning, Divine One. The humans are not like us. They are not like any species we have conquered. If we send another fleet against them, we will lose another fleet. If we send our entire military, we will lose our entire military. They have weapons we cannot match, defenses we cannot break, and the will to use them." She paused. "I respectfully suggest that the Empire seek peace with humanity rather than another war." The Emperor's scales flushed deep purple with rage. "Peace? You dare speak of peace? The Empire does not make peace with lesser species. We conquer, we dominate, we rule." "Then we will die," said simply. "All of us. Every ship, every soldier, every world. The humans will burn the Empire to ashes, and there is nothing we can do to stop them." Emperor stared at her for a long moment. Then he made a gesture, and the Imperial guards dragged away to the dungeons. She would spend the rest of her life in chains, a reminder of the Empire's greatest failure. But her words had planted a seed of doubt that the Emperor could not quite silence. On Earth, A different kind of preparation was. The United Earth government had decided to reach out to the galaxy to introduce humanity to the other species that shared the stars. They needed ambassadors, diplomats who could represent humanity's interests while navigating the complex web of galactic politics. Ambassador Christopher Lane was chosen to lead this effort. He was 61 years old, a slender man with graying hair and gentle eyes that hid a brilliant diplomatic mind. He had spent 30 years resolving conflicts between human colonies, and now he faced the greatest challenge of his career. "Remember," Price told him before he departed, "we're not looking for conquest. We're not looking to replace the galaxy's bullies. We just want to live in peace." Christopher nodded. "I understand, Admiral, but I suspect that peace will be harder to achieve than victory. The galaxy has been dominated by fear for a very long time. Convincing them that we're different will not be easy." He traveled to the Federation first, a collection of 17 worlds that had managed to maintain their independence through clever diplomacy and economic power. They were tall, elegant beings with skin like polished silver and eyes that changed color with their emotions. They had watched the Battle of Saul with great interest. "We welcome humanity to the galactic community," the High Speaker said when Christopher arrived. "Your victory over the has changed the balance of power throughout known space. Many species are eager to learn more about you." "And many are afraid," Christopher replied. "I understand their fear. We displayed power that exceeded anything the galaxy has seen before, but I want to assure you that humanity has no interest in using that power for conquest." The High Speaker's eyes shifted to a pale blue, indicating curiosity. "Then what do you want, Ambassador?" "Trade, friendship, the exchange of knowledge and culture. We want to be part of the galactic community, not its master." The High Speaker considered this for a long moment. "And if we refuse? If we choose to see you as a threat and act accordingly?" Christopher smiled, but there was something hard beneath that gentle expression. "Then I would respectfully suggest you speak with the 17 survivors before making that decision. We prefer peace, High Speaker, but we will not beg for it." The Federation became humanity's first galactic ally. Trade agreements were signed, cultural exchanges began, and for the first time, human ships traveled to alien worlds as friends rather than warriors. But not everyone welcomed humanity's emergence. On dozens of worlds, species that had lived in fear of the now lived in fear of the humans. Some began to build weapons of their own, hoping to match humanity's power. Others sought alliances, gathering strength in numbers. And a few began to plot, looking for weaknesses they could exploit. Dr. Mitchell tracked these developments from her station on Luna. She had access to intelligence reports from across the galaxy, and what she read worried her. "They're afraid of us," she told Peter Grant one evening. "Look at these reports. They are building a new class of warships. The collective has begun developing quantum weapons. The Dominion of Stars is seeking an alliance with 7 other species." Peter looked at the data she had gathered. "Can any of them match what we have?" "Not yet, but they're trying, and eventually one of them might succeed." Leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. "We won the first battle, Peter, but the war for the galaxy's future is just beginning." Meanwhile, the survivors of the Battle of Saul were trying to rebuild their lives. The prisoners had been given a choice: return to their empire or remain on Earth as refugees. To the shock of the human government, nearly half of them chose to stay. One of these refugees was a young named. He had been a junior engineer on a cruiser that had been destroyed in the first wave of the battle. He had floated in the debris for hours, watching his die around him, before a human rescue ship had found him. "Why did you save me?" he asked the human medic who treated his wounds. "We came to destroy you. We wanted to kill every human on your world. Why show us mercy?" The medic, a young woman named Amy Price, daughter of Admiral Price, looked at him with steady eyes. Because mercy is what separates us from monsters, she said. You came here to destroy us because your empire told you to. You didn't choose to be our enemy, and now that the battle is over, you don't have to be. Did not fully understand her words. In the Empire, mercy was weakness, and weakness meant death. But something in her voice made him want to understand, made him want to believe that there was another way to live. He decided to stay on Earth, to learn about these strange creatures who could kill without hesitation and forgive without conditions. Perhaps, he thought, they could teach him something the Empire never had. Perhaps they could teach him what it meant to be free. 1 year after the Battle of Saul, the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Empire, which had terrorized 100 worlds for centuries, was collapsing from within. Subject species that had lived in fear for generations were rising up against their weakened masters. Without the Grand Fleet to enforce their rule, they could not maintain their grip on their conquests. Ambassador Christopher Lane observed these changes with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. He had spent the year traveling from world to world, building relationships, signing treaties, and slowly constructing a new order to replace the old empire. It was exhausting work, but he believed it was the most important thing he had ever done. The Galactic Council had invited humanity to participate in their annual assembly for the first time. Christopher stood before the gathered delegates, representatives from over 60 species, and spoke with calm confidence. Humanity seeks no empire, he declared. We have no interest in ruling others or expanding through conquest. We ask only for the right to exist in peace and to trade with our neighbors on fair terms. We offer our friendship to all who want it and our respect to all who deserve it. A murmur ran through the assembly. Many of the delegates had expected the humans to demand tribute, to claim territory, to act like every other powerful species in galactic history. This humble approach was confusing. A delegate from the hegemony, a species of short, stocky beings with thick gray hide, rose to speak. And what of those who do not want your friendship? What of those who see humanity as a threat to be eliminated? Christopher's gentle expression did not change, but something hardened in his eyes. Then I would suggest they reconsider. Humanity does not seek war, but we will not shy from it. Any species that attacks our people will face the full strength of our defenses. We proved that against and we will prove it again if necessary. So you offer peace with one hand and threaten annihilation with the other, the delegate said. No, Christopher replied. We offer a choice, peace or war, friendship or enmity, cooperation or conflict. The decision is yours. We will respond accordingly. The Galactic Council debated for 3 days before reaching a verdict. By a vote of 52-8, with 3 abstaining, they formally recognized humanity's sovereignty and territorial claims. Trade agreements were approved, diplomatic relations were established, and humanity officially became a member of the galactic community. The 8 species that voted against recognition were noted. Humanity would watch them carefully in the years to come. On Earth, life was slowly returning to normal. The debris from the battle had been cleared, the damaged defense platforms had been repaired, and new weapons had been developed to prepare for future threats. But the changes went deeper than technology. Admiral Price had retired from active service. She had spent her life preparing for a war she hoped would never come, and now that it had come and gone, she found herself uncertain of her purpose. She returned to her family home in Virginia and tried to remember what it was like to live without the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Her daughter Amy visited often, bringing news from the outside world. It was during one of these visits that finally spoke about what the battle had cost her. I killed millions of beings, she said, sitting in her garden with the summer sun warming her face. Millions of living creatures who had families, hopes, dreams. They came here to destroy us, but they were still alive until I gave the order that ended them. Amy took her mother's hand. You saved billions more, every human on Earth in the colonies everywhere. If you hadn't stopped them, they would have killed us all." "I know," nodded slowly. "And I would do it again without hesitation. That's what troubles me most. I would do it again, Amy. I would kill another million, another billion, if that's what it took to protect our people." She paused, her gray eyes looking at something far away. "What does that make me?" Amy squeezed her hand. "It makes you human, Mom. It makes you one of us. We're capable of terrible things when we have to be, but we're also capable of mercy, of compassion, of love. The survivors learned that. The galaxy is learning that. Maybe it's time you learned it too." Smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Some wounds, she knew, would never fully heal. Dr. Mitchell continued her work on Luna, developing new technologies that she hoped would never be needed. Peter Grant had become her full partner now, a brilliant scientist in his own right. Together, they pushed the boundaries of human knowledge, always preparing for the next threat. "Do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing?" Peter asked one day. Looked up from her calculations. "Every day, every single day. But then I remember the fleet coming for Earth, and I know that the only thing worse than having these weapons is not having them when you need them." Lisa Graham had been promoted to captain and given command of her own battleship, the Indomitable. She spent her days patrolling the borders of human space, watching for any sign of trouble. Sometimes at night, she would stand at the viewport of her cabin and look out at the stars, wondering which one might harbor the next enemy. Young had become an admiral, taking over the Sol Defense Network from Price. He approached his duties with the same quiet dedication that had served him during the battle, always preparing, always watching, always ready. And on 1,000 worlds across the galaxy, species that had once trembled at the name now spoke a different name. Humanity, a species that had risen from a single blue world to challenge the greatest empire in the galaxy. A species that had shown mercy to defeated enemies and ruthlessness to those who threatened them. A species that wanted peace but was prepared for war. The empire crumbled completely within 5 years of the battle. Emperor was overthrown by his own people, and the species that had once ruled through fear became refugees, scattered across a galaxy that had no more reason to fear them. Some of these refugees came to Earth, seeking a new home among the species that had defeated them. They were accepted because that was the human way. Enemies could become friends. Conquerors could become neighbors. The past could be forgiven, even if it was never forgotten. The young engineer who had chosen to stay on Earth after the battle eventually became a citizen of the United Earth government. He worked in the shipyards of Mars, helping to build the vessels that would carry humanity deeper into the stars. When people asked him why he had abandoned his own species to live among former enemies, he had a simple answer. "Because the humans taught me something the Empire never could," he would say. "They taught me that strength without mercy is just cruelty, and cruelty in the end destroys itself." The galaxy continued to change. New alliances formed, old hatreds faded, and slowly, carefully, a new order emerged. It was not perfect. It was not peaceful. There were still conflicts, still wars, still species that looked at humanity with fear or hatred, but it was better than what had come before. And at the center of it all stood Earth, a small blue world that had refused to kneel. A world that had looked at the stars and decided that its people would not be slaves. A world that had built weapons of unimaginable power and then chosen not to use them for conquest. Humanity had announced itself to the stars. They had proven that the strong could be defeated, that empires could fall, that courage and determination could triumph over numbers and cruelty. They had changed the galaxy forever. And they were just getting started.